Hello, you're listening to Storytelling Saga, the podcast that shares stories. I'm your host, Allie, and this week I'm discussing storytelling cliches, and I figured to start out by defining the word cliché. So this is from an article on nownovel.com titled, What is Cliché? Cliché Examples and How to Avoid. And it says, the word cliché means a phrase or opinion that is overused and betrays a lack of original thought. A secondary broader meaning is a very predictable or unoriginal thing or person. The word comes from the French cliché, meaning to click, in reference to the click a printer's metal stereotyping plate would make. Thus, there is the implicit idea of copying, of lifting, and reproducing something unchanged. So obviously within storytelling, there are so many cliché phrases and well-known character types and overused plot devices. And for me personally, I am guilty of using cliches in my own writing as well. And that's the thing about cliches. They are cliché because they are so well known and so popular amongst audiences. And there is a saying, which is a cliche itself, that every story has already been told. So all of these movies that we see from Hollywood, it's basically the same stories over and over, but maybe with just different elements added here and there. And when it comes to cliche phrases, they just become expressions and figures of speech that we all know so well. And it's just an easy way of conveying a meaning that you're trying to get across. So obviously it's important to be mindful of cliches, but I'd be a hypocrite to say to avoid them at all costs, since I do use them here and there. But what's great, though, with certain plot devices in particular is when people can take them and put their own unique spin on them with stories that we've seen time and again, but then tell them perhaps in a different way, or different types of characters, different elements added to the plot device to tell the story. So that's what makes something really compelling and stand out against all these other stories that we've seen so many times, because every genre has its own storytelling cliches. Whether it's romance or mystery, horror, they all have their own well-known plot devices associated with the genre. So, for instance, if I say fairy tale, you already know right then and there the two biggest phrases for every single fairy tale. They all begin with once upon a time, and they all end with and they lived happily ever after. And that's just true to every single fairy tale. And then there are, of course, just phrases that we hear so often, such as the grass is always greener on the other side, or ignorance is bliss. There's just so many where as soon as you hear it, you already know the meaning behind it. When pigs fly, just so many cliche sayings. And when I looked up all these different sayings, I pulled from various articles and stuff, and there's one article in particular that I found titled 681 Clichés to Avoid in Your Creative Writing. So that one's really extensive. I'm not going to sit here and read all of those, but that's the title of the article if you care to look it up and see all of those. And it's actually listed in alphabetical order, so that's cool. But then what's interesting too with cliched phrases is when you can take a phrase and put your own spin on it as well. Such as that phrase, pot calling the kettle black. Like when instead a character says, oh, hello, pot, this is kettle, you're black. Just like things like that. So depending on the genre of whatever the story is, here and there cliches aren't a big deal. But, I mean, if you're littered with cliches, then you run the risk of being predictable and boring. And obviously you want to draw the audience in and have your own unique voice as a storyteller. But cliches, they can be fun, and since they're just so familiar, obviously, and so recognizable. Like if you say, like a kid in a candy store, or plenty fish in the sea, there's just so many. So in my research, I found actually various cliches relating to specific things. For instance, this one is cliches that describe time. Only time will tell, in the nick of time, lost track of time, lasted an eternity, just a matter of time, a waste of time, time flies, in a jiffy, the time of my life, at the speed of light. And here's another one. This is cliches that describe people. As old as the hills, fit as a fiddle, without a care in the world, a diamond in the rough. See, that one specifically, that just immediately makes me think of Aladdin. I love Aladdin, my all-time favorite Disney movie. But I digress. Brave as a lion, weak as a kitten. Really? I don't ever heard that one before. Had nerves of steel, ugly as sin. Weak as a kitten. I mean, just to... not to dwell on that, but kittens aren't weak, by the way. Kittens, they bite each other and they're fine. They have thicker skin compared to humans. Anyway, I digress again. Here's another one. This is cliches that describe life, love, and emotions. Opposites attract. Every cloud has a silver lining. Don't cry over spilled milk. The calm before the storm. Oh yes, that's a big one. Laughter's the best medicine. Love you more than life itself. Scared out of my wits. Frightened to death. All is fair in love and war. All's well that ends well. Haste makes waste. The writing's on the wall. Time heals all wounds. What goes around comes around. Ah, yes, good old karma. When life gives you lemons, make lemonade. That's a big one for sure. Head over heels in love. Yep. Gut-wrenching pain. Heart-stopping fear. And for me personally, in my own writing, I have certain go-to phrases, like heart pounding like a jackhammer. I always love that one. Or deafening silence. That's a big one. Or also, actually, I've been told that I open a lot of stories with describing a setting or like describing the sky, things like that. I've also been told, actually, so thinking back now in college, my creative writing courses, one of my professors would say to never open a story with a character waking up. And I've done that plenty of times. And plenty of movies start that way, like, a character waking up and we see their morning routine and we're just in the day in the life of the character as we jump into the story and get to know them before the actual plot of the movie. And with characters in particular, obviously there are so many well-known character types. For instance, the dumb jock, or the ditzy blonde, or how about the wise old person, or maybe the crotchety old person, or how about the bad boy, or of course nerdy characters. So many. I mean, I could go on and on, but again, with characters like that, we've seen them in so many shows, movies, but it's great when you have character types like that and not make them so stereotypical by giving them certain traits that make them unique. And for me personally, I tend to always like the nerdy characters, as you can tell if you've heard me discuss certain shows that have nerdy characters. Like I love Stephen Anita Smith from American Dad, which I haven't discussed that show yet, but I love that show. And I always tend to like the smart characters. But then the dumb characters, quote unquote, are always funny too. I actually just recently was watching an episode of Parks and Rec, and then there's Andy Dwyer, who's just so lovably dumb. Or how about when a character is bad, but then it's like... Then there's characters, say, for instance, like a curmudgeon, but then they have a heart of gold secretly. Or how about just the popular teen, like stereotypical, oh, I'm a cheerleader, I'm so popular, stuff like that too. Or the classic bully character, where they're so mean and cruel to the protagonist, but then the audience can often sympathize with the bully character if you see that they have a rough life, so that it's not that they're all mean, but then we see that that's the way they are, so then they can grow and become softer and losing their mean ways to really turn around instead of being a one-dimensional, one-note bully character. Or how about the dopey dad type character, or the overprotective mother type character, or the strict mother type character. And then, of course, in shows in particular, when you have a dumb character, say, and then they become flanderized when they get increasingly dumb. And flanderized, that term, in fact, is an homage to Ned Flanders from The Simpsons. And it just means that a trait from a character just becomes increasingly over the top as the series progresses. Whereas I think with that, I don't watch Simpsons, but with that character, it was that, because I've read this before, that he was religious and now he's become so religious. I believe that's what his Flanderization was. So that's where that term comes from. So if a character is slightly dumb, just to stick with that, then they become like just ridiculously over the top dumb. And I'm thinking, as I'm saying this, I'm thinking of Joey from Friends, how he became dumber as the series progressed. So certain characters like that, where they take certain qualities and just really amplify them just for the sake of attempting to keep the show fresh. And then of course there's that term jumping the shark, and that comes from the show Happy Days, when the Fonz literally jumped over a shark. And the term just means that it's the show doing over the top, increasingly far-fetched things for the sake of newness to keep the show fresh. And that's when you know it's like, oh, this series jumped the shark. In other words, it's not good anymore. It's just got so ridiculous and over the top. And with TV in particular, they always say that things are purposely amplified or heightened for the sake of creating more conflict. So then, of course, there is, for example, when you have on a show an odd couple dynamic. And I've mentioned that before because a lot of shows do that, when one's smart and one's dumb, anything, basically just polar opposite characters. One's a neat freak, one's a slob, things like that. But then say they're best friends, or it's an actual couple, like a romantic couple, or they're siblings, anything where it's just a duo and they just have opposing personalities. The Angry Beavers, Dag the super hyperactive and Norb the laid back character. And then with The Odd Couple, that comes from The Odd Couple, which was a play and then turned into a series, and that was Felix and Oscar, with Felix being the neat freak basically and Oscar being the slob. So everything is always, as I've said this before too, everything's always derivative of something else, because every story has already been told, and it's just a matter of putting your own interesting spin on something that's already been told so many times. And a big cliche plot device that's been used in so many shows and movies is when a character gets amnesia and then they don't remember anything about themselves, and then the other characters have to remind them about things. Or what's often the case is that they kind of use it to their advantage, which is messed up when you think about it. But they think, oh, this is my opportunity to just do whatever they want. Like, oh, like change something about the character that has amnesia because it's like a clean slate and they don't remember their past, which is messed up. But I remember that plot though that's used in the last episode of Full House when Michelle gets amnesia. So in that case then it's everyone feeling bad though, and then like feeling like they're not themselves because Michelle isn't herself, because they're all family. And that's the whole thing with that show. Everything's always the mushy, saccharine, cheesy family stuff, but it's cute though. That's for what that show is. But so I like it. I think it's cute, but it's just done so much, that type of story. Another huge plot device in basically nearly everything, so many things, but again, it's interesting depending on the characters and stuff like that. Of course, love triangles. And then, of course, then you got shipping wars when certain fans want these two to get together, but then other fans want the other two to get together. And more often the case in love triangles, it's not that it's character A likes B, but B likes C, but C likes A. It's really less of that, and it's more so the case that, say, character A is dating B, but then is starting to develop feelings for C because C likes A. That's often the case, or even more often the case, character A has feelings for B and C and doesn't know who to choose. So it's kind of like the, 2 dates to the prom situation. It's like, well, I like this person, but I'm starting to develop feelings for this person, so who do I choose? Things like that. But love triangles, they add drama to whatever it is, the series, things like that. But then they complicate things for, say, the protagonist, like, who am I going to choose? I don't know who's better for me. And then what's often the case is that they end up with neither of them, or they end up with the new person that they have feelings for now, because then it's like they are kind of emotionally cheating if they're with someone, then they're starting to have feelings for someone else that they rather would be with, but then things are complicated because maybe that person is seeing someone at the moment. You know, you've heard it all time and again, these types of stories with romance in particular. So that's the thing, because I tend to always like romantic comedies, things like that. So that's with movies too, and with shows. Like, I like shows that have the humor and the heart to them. Like, another show I haven't discussed yet is New Girl. And that one had its own spin later on in the series with a love triangle. Because it wasn't so much a love triangle as it was when Jess realized she had feelings for Nick again, but then he was seeing someone at the time. So they kind of switched it around, because for the longest time it was him pining for her, and then she was already with someone, and then when they finally got together. But anyway, that's just one example of thousands and thousands. Or another one from Fruits Basket, my all-time favorite anime, which I'm still waiting to discuss it because I haven't finished it yet with my sister, and I'm hoping she's going to be on to join me, so stay tuned for that. Anyway, so with that, it's Toru Honda, Kyo-soma, and Yuki-soma, so that's basically a love triangle, except not really if you know the anime. So, spoiler alert, she ends up with Kyo, thank God. Because, yeah, we love Kyo, my sister and I. Anyway, I digress again, but is this just an excuse for me to just kind of fangirl about things that I've mean to get to? Probably. So my point with all that is that with love triangles in particular, they're just never going to go away, is the whole point. So one other example with this love triangle trope, the one I was thinking of as I was saying, well, character A is dating B but may like C. The one I was actually thinking of as I was saying that was from Gilmore Girls, when Rory was first dating her first boyfriend, Dean, and then Jess came into the picture. That guy, Jess, who is Luke's nephew. And then she started developing feelings for him. So then it was a bit of a love triangle for a while, when he clearly had feelings for her too. And then she eventually left Dean for him, for Jess. And then eventually then she had the other boyfriend. I can't think of his name at the moment. Logan, that's it. Oh my goodness. I was like, it's going to drive me crazy. I'm trying to remember. Anyway, I will get to Gilmore Girls. I have opinions about that, who Rory should or shouldn't have ended up with. I know the fan base seems to favor Jess for Rory, but Rory has her own problems. Anyway, again, I digress. I'm just always so eager to talk about my favorite shows. But another huge trope is the whole will they, won't they? And again, that's more prominent in series when you're with characters week after week. So the will they, won't they, again, going back to New Girl with Nick and Jess, which was really established from the very first episode, how they clearly have this connection, but then when that first episode, they're both getting out of relationships because Jess was cheated on and Nick was getting over his ex, Caroline. See now, oh my God, I keep going on tangents, I'm sorry, but that actress, I just think of now, because I've been watching now for the first time Always Sunny in Philadelphia, so she's the waitress in that show. And there's something about the build-up that, to me, is just always more compelling and interesting to watch unfold. Because then when the couple actually gets together, then it's just like, oh, now we're a couple. Now, of course, it's just the trials and tribulations of relationships, and then that dynamic, and it's like creating conflict in that way. So, in other words, to me, half the fun is the chase, to use another cliche. Another one I'm thinking of as I'm saying that, with the will they, won't they, is Vince and Holly from What I Like About You. I really love that show. I will get to that show eventually. Starring Amanda Bynes and Jenny Garth, who, again, odd couple dynamic with the sisters, with Holly as kind of the free spirit and her sister Val, her older sister Val. They live together, and Val is kind of the more serious, uptight one. But another big cliche, I'm still sticking with romance for a little bit, just bear with me. Another one is when friends fall in love with each other. And I just said friends now, so I mean the will they, won't they, let's just say it. Ross and Rachel from Friends. But also Friends falling in love, you had Chandler and Monica, definitely the superior couple in that show. Because Ross and Rachel, you know the whole thing. Were they on a break? We were on a break. Ugh, can't get into all that right now. But another one that I loved as a kid, well, I was a young teen. I loved Danny and Sam from Danny Phantom. Those were two best friends falling in love. Another one, similar, Ned and Mose from Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide. So it's so cliche, two best friends falling in love. But again, it's that slow build-up, that connection between two people so that you just love watching it unfold. And maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't in the end. But again, it's always just, it's cute to me as it unfolds. Another one too, similar, is when you have the love-hate relationship where it's like the characters kind of butt heads, but then they have that chemistry between them. And to go back to What I Like About You, that was always Tina and Gary. And then they finally end up together in the series finale because they were like friends, but not really, just because they're all friends in that same social group. Because Holly and Gary were always best friends, and then Tina eventually came along in that group. And again, too, with What I Like About You, What I Like About You does have a lot of rom-com tropes, I will say. But I love that show. It's a great show. In that one, too, it had the bit of a love triangle when Holly was first dating Henry, and then she started having feelings for Vince. Another huge one is when characters just have love at first sight. And that's so big in Disney movies. I could just, Aladdin, when Aladdin just falls for Jasmine, just seeing her at the marketplace. Also, Ariel from, I say Ariel, but Ariel, I guess I'll say it that way. Ariel from Little Mermaid, when she just sees Eric and just falls in love with him. I mean, even in New Girl, when Nick says that he fell in love with Jess the moment she walks through the door, so they retcons that. Even though, really, in the first episode, he's still getting over his ex. Another big one is when a character uses another character to make someone jealous. Like, I gotta make my ex jealous, so let me go on a date with this person. And then either they start to develop feelings for each other, or, things like that. Or the other character realizes that they shouldn't be with the ex anymore anyway. Stuff like that. And then I could keep going about rom-com stuff. But just since I'm still talking about rom-com stuff, another thing I will say, something I hate in rom-coms, because it's so unrealistic, is running through the airport, which nowadays, obviously, you can't get away with that. But when characters want to reunite, or it's like, before they get on the plane, even in Friends, I got off the plane, just chasing down your love interest to profess your love. And then, so what I hate about that is when other characters care. It's like, you got to go reunite with your one true love, and then it's like they want to help them. It's like, you're a complete stranger. In real life, no one would give a damn at all. They wouldn't care. They'd be like, okay, I don't care what you have to do. I have my own stuff I have to do. It's just me thinking that. People are very empathetic. That's nice in movies. Or when they give the whole speech and then everyone just applauds, like, oh, that's great. Like, now let's kiss, have a big dramatic kiss, kiss in the rain. Now, since I'm mentioning kisses, I'll go off on a tangent with kisses. So many cliches with kisses, too. Like, for instance, when a character is angry, like going on angry rants, like, oh, yeah, and then they just kiss each other. It's just like with all the passion. Or when characters hint like, oh, you should be with someone who's crazy about you. Someone who, and it's like they're talking about themselves, or maybe they didn't realize yet that they're in love with the person. Oh, man. Stuff with romance, I just, I love it, though. I am a sucker for it, I will admit. But, it's stuff that we've seen time and again. So, again, it's a matter of putting your own unique spin on it to not make it so cliche. But it's just stuff we've seen over and over with rom-coms, especially with all their tropes. So now moving away from that a little bit, another big trope is when characters, like the whole, like, it was all just a dream type trope, which then tends to actually anger audiences. Like, oh, so that was all for nothing. Isn't even real. It didn't even happen. Or when a character has a dream and they wake up screaming, like in a cold sweat, that's so over the top too. Like, it's so dramatic. Like, my God, like, you had such a bad nightmare that you wake up, bolt up, like, like, that was crazy. Or another big one that I myself have used, another big plot device, is two characters, two or more, I guess, stuck in a room together or just trapped somewhere together. And I actually used that in a one-act play that I wrote, and it was two 8th graders, and they were in detention. So technically they weren't stuck, they could have left, but they were in detention. And I actually won a runners-up in the like drama award for it, so I was very proud of that. But it's been used so many times, just characters stuck together for whatever reasons, then it really ups the tension. And in my case, it wasn't a romance or anything, but it was two characters kind of understanding each other in a different way. So I guess vaguely, like you could say, vaguely like The Breakfast Club in that case. And that too, that movie is obviously brilliant when it plays with the stereotypes, but then you see that each character, they have their own vulnerabilities, and it's just like, this is their persona in high school. Like, you know, obviously, each of their tropes, like when they say it at the end, the nerd, the basket case, the princess, all of that. Sincerely yours, Breakfast Club. So with that, taking those tropes and just kind of seeing beyond that. So that's brilliant in and of itself with that movie. But another big one is an evil twin. And then it's like, oh, I don't know which is the real one. Like, which is the real one to kill? They've done that on so many shows. They did that on American Dad, actually, and also on Family Guy, which I don't even watch Family Guy anymore, but I do love American Dad, though. And then, of course, there's, say, superhero tropes, too, and the supervillains. And then, of course, for instance, the comical, classic supervillain, like the maniacal laugh, or the point in the movie, for instance, when they have to explain their whole plot. Like, oh, you see, so all along I did this, whatever, explaining the whole plot to the protagonist when the protagonist is about to die. But then, of course, at the last second, they're saved. One cliche that I hate, because it's so annoying to me. It's when a character has to tell a character something, and then the other character, before they can say it, interrupts them saying like, oh, it's just so great having you here, or oh, I can't wait for us to work together, something like that, to basically stop the other character from saying like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore, whatever it is. And then it's like, oh, so what are you going to say? And then they just have to lie, like, oh, I can't wait to, and just drags it out more, obviously, until you get to the third act and they finally come clean. So anything with lying and stuff is just so frustrating to me. And obviously a big thing, too, in television is miscommunications. When one character thinks, like the double entendres, for instance, when one character is talking about something and then another one is talking about something else and it seems similar, but really they're talking about two different things. That's a huge trope. And often that's funny, though, I will say, but it's just so overused. And when a character is hiding something from another one, and then like all of your problems would go away if you just talked to each other and were honest from the beginning. But then, of course, you wouldn't have any conflicts then. So then it's like you got to stretch it all out until they finally come clean with whatever it is. So that's just kind of ridiculous, too, but just for the sake of a 3-act structure of a TV show or a movie, too. But it's more common in TV, though, I will say. So, I mean, I could just go on and on about different TV tropes in particular. But also with going back to superheroes, like kind of like the unlikely, not necessarily even superheroes, but just like the unlikely hero, where like say they're an ordinary person, but then all of a sudden they just have the one key to whatever it is, like the one skill set's like, oh, like you're the key to whatever, solving whatever the issue is. Going back to, again, the diamond in the rough with Aladdin. Can't help myself. I love Aladdin. But, so yeah, the whole misunderstandings thing is huge. Also, to touch on stock characters again, I didn't mention Mary Sue type characters. Those are definitely a big no-no in storytelling when it's just a seemingly perfect character. And then all the other characters just like fall in love with the character, for instance, just as an example, because they're just so perfect. And then that's the thing. You want characters with flaws to make them interesting. Otherwise, how can we as humans relate to them, since we're all flawed in our own way? No one's perfect. I've been told also to not start a story with just a character reflecting, kind of, because then it's like there's no action. You want the character to be doing something, basically. And I've done that before, just a character kind of like reflecting on things. So what are you going to do? I mean, since every story's already been told, we gotta figure out a way to make it more interesting and compelling and have our own personal spin on it. So, as they say, good things come to those who wait. Easy come, easy go. You win some, you lose some. And with that, that is going to conclude this week's episode of Storytelling Saga. You can follow the podcast on Facebook and Instagram at Storytelling Saga, as well as on Twitter at Storytell Saga. You can also send me any questions, comments, or writing prompts by leaving me a message in the contact section of storytellingsaga.com or by sending me an email at storytellingsaga@gmail.com. Next week, I'll be sharing a new short story I wrote called What's Your Spirit Animal? Until then, thank you for listening, and remember, write what you love.